Good afternoon, Nubian guys and goddesses. It's TB Wahid in the living room, Black Living Room Talk, with you. I am reading the very first introduction to The Racist Mind. Who am I? How do I fit in the world? We ask this of ourselves, each of us, including the Klansmen and the Nazi. For these people, the answer is race. I am a member of the white race. My people built this civilization, built this country. We have the intelligence and the initiative for the task. Our blood is different and special. Our heritage has been taken from us. Inferior races have taken power through their cunning. My race is near destruction. Most of my people are numb and passive, seduced and tranquilized by the enemy. The enemy plans the full destruction of my race's genius, its blood, through racial mixture. Ultimately, we or our enemy will be destroyed. The core of this statement, that race identifies an essential defining quality and that the white race is superior, is both similar to and different from the thoughts of most white Americans. It leaves out the many other ways through which people can see a connection to the larger society, through church, profession, occupation, age group, gender, school, or social class. It leaves out whiter images of democratic community or religious fellowship that suggest a future beyond race. It does, on the other hand, resemble majority white perception by taking race, an idea built over time by a society and having little scientific significance, as a biologically meaningful description of reality, and therefore a fundamental way to categorize people. It further resembles majority white perception by taking for granted the specialness and the entitlement of Americans of European descent. Most white Americans, however, have little acquaintance with the parts of their psyches that are congruent with the spirit of the acknowledged racist. We do not know, the old joke says, who discovered water, but we do know that it was not a fish. Just so, in a society in which white folk predominate and are seldom challenged in everyday life, white Americans have little conscious awareness of being white or of what that might mean. Only challenge or crisis makes this categorization relevant. The militant white racist movement is composed of people who permanently feel in crises. The militant white racists look at a world in which white Americans and non-white Americans are treated differently in almost every interaction. They infer that race is a powerful biological construct that identifies essences. They are unfamiliar with modern genetic research, which has found that race identifies only trivial aspects of human genetic variation. They look at a world in which almost all positions of power are held by men who are white. They infer that whites and men have a nature that is superior. The boss, the person we must worry about, is white. Everyday experience tells the militant white racist that race is basic and that white is good. Because most white Americans at some level share these perceptions, the potential exists at all times for the militant movement to expand its influence. The militant movement keeps these ideas fresh and strong, persistently re-injecting them into the social discourse, and ensuring that people stay vulnerable to interested parties who wish to use racism to capture public allegiance. Many, perhaps most, of the readers of this book are, like the author, white. Well, I'm not. We, in the general European American public, share many beliefs with the militant white racists, but we are not identical to them. It is not that we have met the enemy and he is us. We whites believe many things. We believe most of them in a dull and muddled and jumbled fashion. Many of our beliefs are contradictory. The militant movement takes one of the many jumbled belief sets in our heads and preserves it in sharpened, intense form, adding to it a sense that life is struggle, that the fundamental issue between humans is power, that the world divides into good and evil, and that good and evil must fight to the death, and that events usually have hidden causes. Because the movement rests partly on beliefs that are a part of us white Americans, but a part that we do not acknowledge and do not deal with, it has enjoyed an extraordinary long life. It is regenerated again and again, taking new forms as circumstances change. We are astonished by the resurgence of Nazism in Europe. We have already seen large numbers of the American public seduced in the last 2 decades by racist appeals from mainstream politicians. The situation is going to become worse. Our national economy is grinding through brutal transformation. An enormous number of people can have no confidence that their jobs, wage levels, health care, or pensions are safe. They face erosion of their positions. Their fears will become only more acute as the swelling populations of the underdeveloped nations try to save themselves through mass migration. These highly predictable changes are going to make white Americans more and more vulnerable to a movement whose ideals are already a part of their inner life. The basic propositions about the centrality of race and the superiority of whites pervade interactions in our culture, and institutional forms make these is part of everyday life, everyday experience. It is likely that non-whites internalize these messages to some degree, and much against their will, just as women absorb the presumptions of sexism. My research for this book speaks only of the mental and emotional life of whites. I am interested in the relation of acknowledged white racism to its unacknowledged white cousins. This is a fairly personal book. For a decade, I have interviewed followers and leaders in the militant white racist movement, the white supremacist movement, and have observed some of their rallies and get-togethers. I have dealt openly and honestly with these people, making it clear that I am Jewish, a leftist opposed to racism, a professor at the University of Michigan. I have told them honestly that I think people build lives that make sense to them, and that my goal is to understand the sense the person's life makes to that person. I tape record conversations so the person's own words can be used. I listen much more than I talk. I try to ask certain questions. I try to encourage the respondent to give me a full picture of his life. I show him periodically how our basic beliefs differ and explore with him the basis of those beliefs. Occasionally, I explain myself with passion if I already know the respondent. I learn a lot from confrontation. Communication rests on my candor, their interest in being heard, my deep interest in understanding the phenomenon, and my background in a particularly racist culture. Until 1944, when I was 12, I lived in an East Texas town during the years of total segregation. The values inside our family's home were liberal and egalitarian. The values and institutions outside the door were unselfconsciously racist. I hate racism, which sunders the world I want to live in and harms great masses. But I have no trouble knowing that the racist is a comprehensible human. We went to school together. In my research, I have tried to understand the life and the thinking of the people I have met. Much comes from the interviews, but the observations of gatherings have also helped. I have been able to watch and listen as the movement members talk to each other and outline the party line for each other. This book, a selection from those experiences, expresses the sense I make of my work. Someone else would have interviewed differently and would have interviewed different people and chosen different excerpts for presentation. Moreover, the guardedness of the movement presents many barriers to understanding. The best corrective for distortions produced by my idiosyncrasies would be similar pieces of work by others who had different backgrounds. Unfortunately, field work is not popular in social science, and this subject matter is even less popular. So there is extremely little research involving direct experience with the white racist movement. But the reader does need to remember that these are one man's reflections, nothing more, based on a great deal of challenging work out in the real world, nothing less. The book tries to give an idea of the beliefs at the core of the movement today, the emotions in which those beliefs are drenched, and the life histories that lead to membership. This helps us understand the meaning and significance of the movement, but the reader should also remember that you have not accounted for a movement when you have only described some members. A movement is more than the sum of the psychology of its members. Its history, its structure, its links to other groups, and its ideology also shape a movement. There are more books to be read, but I hope that this introduction to the psychology of the membership will give the reader a useful grounding. The militant white racist movement and the latest estimates by reliable groups such as the Center for Democratic Renewal, CDR, and the Southern Poverty Law Center includes about 23,000 to 25,000 hardcore members. Some 150,000 sympathizers buy movement literature, send contributions to movement groups, or attend rallies, and another 450,000 people who don't actually purchase movement literature do read it. Of the hardcore, 5,500 to 6,000 belong to one or another of the clans. 3,500 are skinheads, and 500 to 1,000 are in Nazi groups or in groups close to the Nazis. The remainder of the hardcore is much less easily identified. The CDR refers to them as the Christian Patriot Movement. They can be found in politically active churches of the Christian Identity sect and in rural groups scattered across the country. The American Jewish Committee usually endorses the CDR's estimates. The Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith concurs largely, but would omit the Christian Patriots from the tally. The militant movement is a loose confederation of small groups. Coordination comes from the constant circuit riding of the leaders and their lieutenants, and from the rather frequent gatherings at which speechmakers lay out the party line, which is taken by minor leaders back to their own groups. Policy involves in the conversations of leaders with each other, in person and on the phone, and in the argument over tactics between these very competitive organizations. The media image of a monolithic group is misleading, but a commonality of basic precepts does lead to considerable coherence in action. The Klan itself is not the united organization that it was decades ago. For years it has been made up of some 30 or 40 competing organizations, each with a name involving the word Klan. At present, one wing of the Klan seeks to grow by painting itself as intensely activist, while another wing seeks to grow through seeming respectable. I think of these as the Roughneck Klan and the Smooth Talk Klan. The Roughnecks figure to attract members by showing that they are tough and audacious. The Smooth Talkers want to show the world that they are simply interested in white unity and have nothing more radical up the sleeves of their robes. It is all the same old mix, however: white supremacy, male dominance, and homophobia. The largest of the clans in recent years have been the Invisible Empire, Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, led by James Ferens from North Carolina, and the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, led by Thom Robb of Arkansas. Ferens disbanded the Invisible Empire in 1993 when a successful lawsuit stripped it of its assets. Some of its former members were reassembled as the United Knights of the KKK, while others are drifting. Additional Klan groups bear names such as the Confederate Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, the White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, and the Southern White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. Some 30 neo-Nazi groups compete for membership. Important clusters include Aryan Nations, led by Richard Butler of Idaho, White Aryan Resistance, led by Tom Metzger of California, and the American Nazi Party. Over 100 skinhead organizations, some with multiple locations, hold names such as Confederate Hammer Skins of Tulsa, Memphis Area Confederate Hammer Skins, Las Vegas Skins, and Southeast Boot Boys. A scattering of organizations aren't readily classified as Klan, Nazi, or skinhead. Some of the groups, such as the main two clans, have been national in scope, with cells in 10 or 20 cities. Most organizations, however, have had a cell in only a few towns. Membership in the movement is highly fluid. Recruits cycle in and out rapidly. In the words of one Klan chief, the movement is a revolving door. People come in and stay a while. They see nothing is happening and they go away. Some fraction of the members, a quarter, a third, will drift away over the next 4 years. A more or less equal number will replace them. The inner circle is permanent. A cadre of leaders and lieutenants, movement activists for life, keep organizations breathing in lean times and rebuild as opportunities arise. Even among the cadre, however, disorder reigns. Would-be leaders split from existing organizations to form new ones. Some of those fail. Others succeed and bleed membership from their rivals. Leader reputations grow and dwindle. Leaders gossip maliciously about one another. Distrustful rivals vie for attention and influence. Trials reveal the presence of informers. Arrested leaders quickly turn state's witness. Loyalty is shallow. Despite jealousies and distrust, the movement does not die. Repeatedly, it has flickered almost to extinction, only to be reborn. The funeral oration for organized white racism is always premature. The continual rebirth speaks to its deep roots in the national culture. The movement has a long history of violence, and its recruits do not enter casually. The aura of violence, or at least of serious determination, is part of the basic attraction, even if the individual recruit has no intention of endangering his own skin. Direct movement violence has declined since the era when local authorities were Klan members or at least quiet collaborators. Movement groups piously disown to the media any person who has been arrested in a violent act, and it is hard to know how much of today's racial violence comes directly from the movement. Most serious analysts figure that the bulk of racial violence and homophobic violence is carried out by unaffiliated individuals, but equally believe that the organized groups do a great deal to set the climate for that violence. The groups that monitor racism, CDR, SPLC, AJC, ADL, periodically release tallies of reported race-related violence. Their most recent figures, which depend upon very incomplete reporting systems in most jurisdictions, say that murders related to race or to the white supremacy movement came to 7 in 1989, 20 in 1990, 27 in 1991, 31 in 1992, and 30 in 1993. There have been hundreds of bias-related assaults in those years, and incidents of race-related vandalism rose from 322 in 1992 to 405 in 1993. Arsons directed at religious institutions more than doubled between 1989 and 1991, with synagogues and Jewish schools the most common targets. The impact of racial and homophobic violence is much greater than simple numbers would suggest. Targeted violence carries powerful messages to the targeted populations. If I live in a medium-sized city and hear that there have been 5 murders during the winter, I feel in the presence of some random violence. If I am a lesbian woman living in that same city and hear that there have been 3 fatal assaults on lesbians, I feel very much endangered, especially when the attackers belong to a hidden and continuing organization. The militant white racist movement is small. Its impact is far greater than its numbers because of the reputation for violence. Historically, the Klan had been the anchor of the movement, and it kept some distance from the Nazi groups as they emerged. Since the 1980s, however, a merging of the tendencies has taken place. What some have called the Nazification of the Klan, ideas and stories and symbols have become indiscriminately mixed among the groups. There is a great attraction to images of Hitler's Third Reich and a sense of identification with an unusually powerful armed force that conquered most of Europe. For the white races, the Wehrmacht was an army of brave, skilled men defeated only by overwhelming numbers. They speak of a Germany in which all classes were brought together in zealous effort by a unique leader, a man who could move great numbers by his voice, a man who brought a pride based on race to a shamed people. These images of strength speak more loudly today to potential recruits than to the older legends of the Confederacy's lost cause. The image of the armed night rider still works, though with less power than the more contemporary images of tank drivers and Stuka pilots. Late-night movies on television have given the relevant public many more images of the Nazi epic than of the Confederacy or of Reconstruction. And I have found that the pictures recruits have in their heads do come precisely from these movies. This is where they have heard of the Third Reich. Most strikingly, recruits have little in their heads to inhibit their adopting these legends. Many have a considerable level of fear about their own survival and their own significance. Identification with strength is deeply rewarding. Nothing inhibits this unconventional identification. The legend is scorned by the establishment, but this only increases its value to young men who feel equally ignored by those in power. Contrary legends are lacking. No alternative myth tells the young man that his life has significance. The Holocaust plays a paradoxical role in all this. On the one hand, Holocaust denial matters to the movement, and it presses claim insistently that it is debatable whether these systematic murders took place. The white racist movement knows that for most people, the immediate association with the word Nazi is the word Holocaust, an association that hinders broad organizing. At the same time, I sense that the movement's fascination with the Holocaust is exactly that, fascination. The most important thing for members about Hitler's regime is that it was a force so strong and so ruthless that it did not hesitate to murder. I think contemporary white racists need to talk endlessly about the Holocaust, need to keep saying over and over that it did not happen so that they can keep talking about it, can keep thinking about it, can keep reassuring themselves that it did happen, that they are a part of a movement so merciless that they are safe. If they really believed Nazism had not killed, it would bore them. On occasion, I have asked a young militant to imagine just for a moment that people like me are telling the truth, that Hitler and his group did kill 6 million Jews, individuals who were in no way guilty of a crime. Would that make any difference to him? Everyone answered it would make no difference at all. Everyone answered it would make no difference at all. The Bolsheviks were Jews, they would say, and had killed 20 million Christians themselves. And bad things happen in wartime anyway, and so on. The point is that not one of the young men who has been able to imagine for a moment that I am right was at all bothered. I think that they are fairly sure that Hitler did murder, and they are fairly glad. It reassures them. Thank you for listening. And that was the first half of the introduction to the book, The Racist Mind. I will be back to read it on Friday evening, where we get into fear. Friday evening. So it will be on Black Living Room Talk. Feel free to catch it at your convenience, at your time. In the meantime, I want you to have a blacktastic day. I'm TB Wahid. Black Living Room Talk.